And I think
it's literally a right-wing misinformation echo chamber
They're
now.
just so
and
shameless.
Rogan is part of it. Rogan is part of it.
It's just incredible to me how shameless.
Do you see this attempt to rehab Rogan now in liberal spaces where they're like, wait, you should have gone on Rogan. You should have. And I'm looking at it like, you guys missed the train, man. That shit left the station a really long time ago. I was on his show 4 or 5 times. I would sit across from him and make left-wing arguments and anti-Trump arguments, and he would nod along in agreement. You know what? He's a grown-ass man. Stop infantilizing him. He went down a right-wing track, ended up in a echo chamber with the dumbest people you've ever seen making the dumbest arguments you've ever heard, and he still believes it, okay? Let's stop infantilizing him. There's no coming back. He's not coming back. It's over. Like, this is it.
Yeah, no, you like...
All right. I have a hot take right there. I have a hot take right here, guys. Are you ready? I disagree with Kyle. You guys always tell us we're like little cucks to Kyle. I love Kyle. I have a lot of respect for Kyle. I understand that Kyle feels really scorned here, Gavin. But to me, I think this is the exact opposite attitude that we should have. I think that this is completely wrong to take that position. What Kyle, and again, I think Kyle deserves the room to lick his wounds. He obviously had like a friendship with Rogan, and he feels probably a little personally hurt by that. I don't want to, analyze him from my armchair over here. We'll ask him about it the next time he comes on. But what I will say is that we have got to win Joe Rogan's audience back. So giving up on it is foolish. Now, I agree with him that Kamala Harris might have face planted on the Joe Rogan experience. I agree that she might have done a bad job, but I also agree that Joe Rogan will agree with anybody who sits across from him and tries to be nice to him, because he has this fundamental character thing where he has to make the person across from him like him. And if he can't find a way to make himself like you, or you like him, and you guys both have this like happy-go-lucky exchange, you can read it all over his face. You can just tell that episode is bad. The thing about Rogan in this stage is that he is 100% surrounded by Trump people, and he's doing that because those are the people who are popular. Those are the people who have clout right now. Those are the people who are going to make his show do better numbers. And he's also in Austin, Texas, in a right-wing echo chamber. What we have to do is make it so impossible to ignore the noise that the left makes, the noise that the progressive anti-establishment movement we are about to establish and roll the ball forward on, a la 2016 Bernie, has to win him back over in the long run. It's more about winning his audience, but I think Joe will get swept up in it too if we do a good job.
Yeah, well, I think that the real important thing is finding a compelling leader for the left, because the only reason why the Republican Party has been rehabilitated and is no longer thought of as like the uncool party, it's because of Donald Trump. It's because people like Joe Rogan and his acolytes think that Donald Trump is cool in a way that they didn't think Jeb Bush was cool, or George Bush, or Paul Ryan, or Mitt Romney, or any of these freaking losers that came before Donald Trump. And obviously, I think Donald Trump is a loser too. You guys know that. But he's also quite literally a winner. We just saw that happen. Like, the guy is a leader in the sense of the fact that he leads the Republican Party. They go where he is at. The Democrats don't have that at all. They're very much in that like 2012 Republican era, when the Republican Party got shellacked by Obama, and then they put up freaking Mitt Romney. I mean, Kamala Harris was the Democratic Mitt Romney. It was like, really? That's your answer to Trumpism? Kamala Harris? In the same way that when the Republicans put up Mitt Romney, it's like, yeah, you're going to need someone a little bit more compelling to take down Barack Obama than Mitt Romney. That's where the Democrats are. We're in this stage where our candidates suck. Our candidates feel like the managers, and the Republicans, for all their fascist faults, at least they kind of feel a little bit like rebellious and renegade, which is total BS. Like I said, because Donald Trump was already president. He was a miserable president. He mostly governed on behalf of rich people in the establishment. We all know this stuff, but vibes are everything. We've been telling you guys that for a long ass time. And instead of continuing with the brat vibes, Kamala Harris decided to associate herself with Liz Cheney and go down the neocon 2000s Republican era, rabbit hole as far as her vibes. That was a terrible, terrible idea. She lost for other reasons too, but that was a big one. My point is, people like Joe Rogan and people in Joe Rogan's audience, unfortunately, they do need a leader. They can't think in any other terms. So if there's not someone compelling, dynamic, interesting, and a little bit cool leading the Democratic Party, or at least a prominent leader of the Democratic Party like Bernie was for a little bit, without that, I do agree with Kyle. I think that Joe Rogan is a lost cause. I don't think there's really any point on trying to convince him or whatever. Maybe there are people in his audience, yes, but yeah, it's going to be a drop in the bucket. Like when Ben Burgess went on Joe Rogan and he was like the one token leftist that month or that 3 months, that quarter, you know what I'm saying? And no one cared. It didn't make any difference.
Joe also didn't seem to be that interested in the conversation. I hate to say it. And I agree with you on that. My point is that the only authentic path forward is the one that you laid out in the first time, where we do have that compelling, charismatic leader.
And luckily, I do think this is something Kyle understands. He's been beating the drum for Jon Stewart. I agree with where his head is at. In that case, I'm not going to sit here and, sell you guys the hopium and say, oh, trust me, guys, Jon Stewart's going to save the day. But I do think Kyle's onto something. It's like, yeah, you're going to need someone at that caliber to take down Trumpism. You're not going to get the job done with some mealy-mouthed corporate Democrat. Like, you're just not. You're not going to get the job done. You can't take out a leader with a manager. It's just the way it is.
That's a great way of putting it. You can't take out a leader with a manager. 100%.
Yeah, no matter how fascist that leader is, people are still going to take the leader. But let's watch a little bit more of this, and then we have a bit more to show you guys as well.
There's no coming back. He's not coming back. It's over. Like, this is it.
Yeah, no, you like, he's responsible for his own, political journey and evolution. But it is indicative of, it goes in with the whole, like, smearing of the entire, every Bernie supporter as like a toxic Bernie bro. And I've been thinking too about the bro exit from the Democratic Party. Like, this isn't the whole thing, but think about how every male supporter, yourself included, and even the female supporters, myself included, were smeared as being sexist and racist and toxic for supporting Bernie Sanders. And, it's like, individual people are responsible for their own actions and ideology. Joe Rogan.
And in that context, I think, not to give too much credit to Joe Rogan, but I do think this, if you zoom out, I think it makes even more sense, because unfortunately, how did much of the Democratic Party react when Bernie Sanders posted Joe Rogan's endorsement on his Twitter account? Remember that? Even AOC, who was a prominent Bernie Sanders surrogate, had a freaking hissy fit internally and tried to, take over the campaign and say, I don't approve of this. This is not in line with my values. Do you know what Joe Rogan said 2 years ago on a podcast? This is outrageous. How dare you elevate this man? So from Joe Rogan's perspective, he's like, yeah, I tried to offer my support to these people. They didn't want it. I don't know. It's annoying. It's annoying. I mean, it's not a pass on Joe Rogan's part at all. I don't think it's a pass. And I think he absolutely is complicit in Donald Trump being elected, whatever fascist hijinks Donald Trump gets up to. Yeah, Rogan will have to go to bed at night knowing that he manufactured consent for that he gave his audience permission to support that, despite everything he'd said in the past. But I also just think we have to be honest with ourselves about the fact that Joe Rogan was never going to support Kamala Harris. Joe Rogan, that crowd, they were never going to support Kamala Harris. And speaking of that crowd, Zach, I wanted to get your quick reaction to this clip of Theo Von.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
On Joe Rogan. Because I don't want to, we're in a new era. We're trying to be appealing to people. So I don't want to just like immediately start pearl clutching personally. I want to understand to the best of our ability where this is coming from. And I don't know as much about Theo Von as you do, Zach. So I would be interested in your opinion on if this is just a joke or if it's something he really believes.
Yeah, let's play it and then we'll unpack.
Yeah, it's not pretty though.
Yeah, it's not true. Well, why? I don't understand why left-leaning media, which is mostly Jewish, are calling people white supremacists, dude.
Jewish? Did you just say that?
Yeah, I just don't understand.
Left-wing media is mostly Jewish?
I mean, according to my Jewish friends, it is, But why do they hate white guys?
It's just woke things, man. It's just virtue woke bullshit. It's like
I just don't understand it.
Well, because true.
Yeah,
it's not true.
Well, why?
What's crazy about that, guys, is I like maybe 3 weeks ago, Bernie Sanders went on Theo Von's podcast and they had a great conversation. And Theo Von expertly articulated the hollowness of the American experience and how we don't feel like a community anymore. And he was like, it feels like you're a dope if you try and believe in civic values because we're just a shell corporation for an LLC, not a nation anymore. And then he comes out and I was like, wow, we really need to reach this guy. This guy's the guy that we need to uplift. And then he comes out and he says this, guys. And the reality is that is authentic anti-Semitism spreading. That is real, legit
Do you think he means that though? Like, do you think he legitimately is just repeating that because he thinks it's true? Like,
yes, no, that's the problem. Is I think he genuinely believes it's true. He genuinely believes they're making people hate white folks, and that is how something that as pernicious and something that we think of as being totally removed from the possibility of resurging is the lie that the Jewish people control the media, because he doesn't care if I say, bro, do you know that Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post and he's not Jewish? Do you care that, the most used, the richest man in the world owns Twitter, and you talked about how that's based, and so that's actually another really powerful person controlling the media. How about the Murdoch family controlling all the Republican news that you probably consume? Okay, that's a Christian family from like fucking Australia. So he doesn't want to hear that. What he wants to hear is that these are the people that hate white people, and he's probably been recently radicalized over an issue like Gaza, and it tees him up to be willing to hear something so wrong as this. And for Joe Rogan, who's obviously the smarter of the two, I'm sorry to say, it's his job to not just be like, oh, what? I want you to play into this because I think some of my audience is going to really like what you just said here, but I want to have plausible deniability.
Yeah.
The way he says it is authentic, dude. And then he's like trying to get out of it. He's like, it's like when somebody says something racist and they're like, no, that's just something my black friend said. Like, dude, this to me, that reads as like a person that could be won back potentially, but has been lost to somebody who is a real, legit anti-Semite. And sorry, our camera's moving. I'm going to fix that really quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just taken aback by it, bro, because I remember you saying that like Theo Von was pretty chill from what you'd experienced of him.
Yeah.
You said you liked his comedy. He had Bernie Sanders on. Obviously, Bernie is Jewish. He's had a great conversation with Bernie Sanders. He then cried on air about the genocide in Gaza. Like, this is at least someone who I thought was better than these just really like ugly tropes. Like, I mean, that's not even a joke either. Like I said, I don't really care if you make funny, edgy jokes. Like, I even, as much shit as we give Dave Chappelle, I actually thought that when he did his SNL monologue about the anti-Semitism issue, he actually made some funny jokes in that monologue. People pearl clutched about it, and people tried to act like he was dabbling in anti-Semitism. Maybe he was, but at least it was funny. Theo, that wasn't even really like a joke. He just said it, and then Joe Rogan's like, "What? Like you said?"
And he had to backpedal out of it because he didn't want to get in trouble.
Right, and it's like, I just like, do you genuinely think that Theo Von believes that? Okay, something like even if he does genuinely believe that Jews control left-wing media, does he really like? I just
what it makes me.
Do you think that Jewish people hate white men?
Yes, that's what I think is going on. What I think is going on, guys, and if we want to like seriously unpack how this happens, is what's going on is it's a like a split lens, right? So everybody's familiar with the scene in Do the Right Thing, right? Where he's like, how could you be so racist, bro? You love Michael Jordan. He's your favorite ball player. You love Michael Jackson, right? And he's like, oh, well, those aren't really black guys. Those are people that I like. You know what I mean? And it's like, what are you talking about? Those are fucking 100% like, huge figures in the black community. They're obviously black men, like whatever, right? Like it was that whole like disconnect in your brain, right? And I think what's happened to a guy like Theo Von is he has been listening to a lot of people who are 100% anti-Semitic. And that's where I've been really concerned about these guys like Jacob Shields and these guys like Jackson Hinkle. And when you get that, and it's a huge crossover with the MMA community. And I think because he's cross-pollinated with Rogan, it's really started to hit him. And then you start to be like, oh my gosh, the way that we have fringe lefty podcasts, they have these fringe right-wing podcasts we don't even know about. And it sounds like Theo's been listening to them. So I don't think Theo himself is like sitting at home, like concocting ways to like, solve the Jewish problem, right? But he's listening to people who are, and they're rubbing off on him. And then he's going on this ginormous platform like the Joe Rogan Experience. And Joe Rogan is so self-interested, and he's so like not willing to be the woke scolder, right? But he even less so. That's something in the past he would have definitely called out, by the way. He wouldn't have done the whole.
I actually disagree with that, because do you remember when we covered on the clip him being like, what do you Jews? They like money like Italians like pizza. Remember? Defending the
all right, maybe you're right. Even when I try and see the best in Joe, I'm like, God damn it. But you know what I mean? Like that is wrong. And so when people talk about rising anti-Semitism, that's the shit that we have to be talking about. It's not Hassan Piker. Okay. It's that shit that you just saw right there. And I do think it's important for the left to say, yes, that's a huge fucking problem. And we have to have way better messaging than we have right now, or we are going to lose to that. And that's unacceptable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it seems like a tough thing to counter too, right? Like it seems like a tough thing to really push back against or like debunk, because obviously a lot of these people are just living in a post-truth world. Like they're not going to be convinced by you just sitting them down and being like, hey man, that's a kind of a low-key anti-Semitic dog whistle or trope that you just repeated there, bro. Because like you said, the reason why Joe Rogan didn't do that is because he didn't want to come off as the woke scold in the room. And unfortunately, they've set up this dynamic. I think that's part of Kyle's frustration. It feels like you go in the space, you just say something that's true or accurate, or you push back on something that isn't accurate, and then all of a sudden you're the woke scold. And it's like everyone in the comments is making fun of you for like, can you believe this loser for fucking having the correct opinion, not being a dumbass. Like, and it's true. Kyle got absolutely roasted in the comment section of his last Joe Rogan podcast. Even though he came off very reasonable, they were not having it. And that brings us to one more Kyle Kulinski tweet that I wanted to show everyone. Like I said, Kyle's really been on a tear against Rogan. There's a couple different theories why. We might have time to get into some of those. But if you take a look here, Kyle posted this clip of Joe and says, "Oh, wow, look at that, Joe. It turns out Trump is a fucking liar, and you let him spew his con man bullshit to your audience for 3 hours straight with barely any pushback. Tee-hee-hee." Do you want to take a look at this hilarious clip, Zach?
Absolutely.
So, turns out voting works. It's real. As much as we fucking thought they had it rigged, as much as we thought there was shenanigans and bullshit, and it's just a puppet show, and there's no way anybody could buck the system, turns out voting is still real. So,
it's only
out,
real when my guy
voting
wins.
works.
Isn't that a fucking crazy position to take? And, you know, obviously the other elephant in the room is like, well, Joe Rogan's obviously an idiot, but Kyle Kulinski talking down to him and like making fun of him and twisting the knife on him in a way that we've absolutely never seen Kyle do before. And if you throw up the Reddit page that I see you have pulled up on your computer, Gavin, you can see that a lot of people are suspecting it's because he knows he'll never get invited back on the show. He's obviously written him off as a lost cause. And this guy right here, he says, listening to these recent Kyle rants, I've never seen him so pissed off at Rogan. It actually feels personal. I know the fan base has been vocal about wanting to see real criticism for Joe moving right over the years, but historically Kyle's on JRE before every election to give his takes. Interestingly, he was not this time, and arguably the biggest election ever. After rewatching the episode before Biden's win, you can tell Rogan was visibly verbally annoyed by Kyle regarding the red mirage and mail-in ballots. I don't think Joe wanted him on again. I think Kyle reached out and got ghosted. This pre-election might explain why his takes are more gloves off and probably didn't expect another invite. He did go on one more time after this in 2023, which was after Biden's win. And they got into an argument about Ron DeSantis that I remember, or not even an argument. Kyle was super duper polite. And you could tell that Kyle has so much love and respect for Rogan. And that's why I think it like really soured him that he just, you know, everything that he said to this guy that he viewed as his friend went in one ear and out the other, and he still lost him to all the worst people in the world. But I definitely agree that Kyle's going scorched earth in a way that we've never seen from him before, and I don't expect him back on the Joe Rogan Experience. And to be honest, I don't expect Krystal back on the Joe Rogan Experience either.
Yeah. Krystal's also, you know, she's taking the gloves off too in a couple clips. So yeah, I think you're right, Zach. Definitely no more invites for either of them. And it is a shame. It is a shame because I always enjoyed their conversations. That being said, I also do understand Kyle's frustration. I definitely do. And I think that, yeah, I mean, how many times are you going to go on the show, say the same thing, get Joe Rogan to agree with you, only then for him to turn around and, you know, basically come to the exact opposite conclusion on air over and over again. Like in this clip where he's like, oh, turns out voting works, bro. Turns out voting works. Can you believe it? Yeah, Kyle explained all this shit to him the last time he was on his show. He explained the red mirage. He explained why the results look like at first Donald Trump would win and then ultimately Joe Biden won. Like this all was explained to Joe Rogan. And I do understand from Kyle's perspective being like, yeah, I'm not just going to keep beating my head against a wall. Like at some point, it just becomes like debating your grandpa, you know? And I think that's kind of how you have to look at someone like Joe Rogan. Yeah, he's kind of like your grandpa. You're not going to get anywhere. Maybe your grandpa might say, hey, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point, Zach. You know, I didn't think about it that way. But he's not going to vote for Kamala Harris. He's still going to vote for Donald Trump at the end of the day. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, that's true. My personal approach would be more in the direction of going in and in leveling with these guys, right? And saying, I totally understand why you couldn't rock with Kamala Harris. I also share all of these horrid grievances about her. I think that she was going to continue to do corporate neoliberalism, right? Because Kamala's already lost. We can dogpile her all we want. I don't give a shit. There's no reason to keep pushing that fucking boulder forward. Okay, so let's level with people. Let's meet them where they are with Kamala as the standard. What did Kamala do wrong? And then over time, talk about how you think Donald Trump did those same things wrong. And then you start to talk about how we're going to have to build it. And it might sound like, oh my God, I've heard this story before. This is exactly what Bernie Sanders is. Yeah, we just lost a ton of ground guys and we have to do that again. We have to start contrasting that. And so while you might, and you might be totally right, Gavin, that Joe Rogan is a complete lost cause, that he himself will never be won over, that he's like arguing with your grandpa. But he's also still the host of what I believe is the #1 show in America. And I think a lot of the people in his audience are still the kind of folks that like to think of themselves as open-minded, even if maybe they aren't so much these days. And if you are able to draw clear comparisons to the policies of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to Donald Trump while he is president, and talk about how we need a new third option within the Democratic Party, an old FDR style Democratic Party, talk about Eugene Debs, talk about the new
this
Gilded
is all
Age.
stuff Kyle talked about, though. That's my point. Like,
Right. I just think you have to keep doing it. I just don't think it's over now. Well, I think that when Kyle goes over there and he's like, this is a lost cause, this is completely baked cake, I just disagree with that.
No, and I 100% agree with you. I don't even think Kyle would necessarily say that. I'm saying where I sympathize with Kyle is I think that he doesn't want to have to keep being the person doing that.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, totally.
Like, he's done it 5 or 6 times now. It's someone else's turn. Kyle can't keep bearing this burden of like, you have to go change Joe Rogan's mind.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Clearly, he's not going to be able to pull it off for whatever reason. So, yeah, do I hope that Joe Rogan invites other people with left-wing views on his show? 100%. Obviously, I hope to see more lefties on that show, not just because I agree with their politics, but because it genuinely makes the Joe Rogan Experience a way better podcast, a way more interesting podcast to listen to when he's talking to someone who doesn't just agree with him on everything, when he's not just talking to some nut hugger like Andrew Schultz or one of these dumbass comedians who tours around with him, right? So even from just a content perspective, yeah, I hope that Joe keeps engaging with lefties. I just understand why Kyle doesn't want to keep doing it. I understand. I sympathize with him being like, look, what the could I possibly do differently at a certain point? I've tried over and over again. I'm not just going to keep being like the token leftist,
Oh, no, that I totally understand. I was more speaking broadly. No, and as you clarify that, it does make sense, right? Kyle has been the actual only one outside of what maybe David Pakman and Abby Martin, right? Throughout all of the years, he's like the guy, and he just gets beaten up on by Joe's audience. I totally get why he would be exhausted with that, why he would be like, this, why would I do that? I'm totally ready to burn my bridge with you.